All right, welcome to the prophet Habakkuk. He is actually one of my favorite, particularly among the 12 quote-unquote minor prophets, and I think that he has a lot to teach us in his attitude, in his dialogue with God, and what he receives from God, and I think that's very relevant to our chaotic times today. So my hope is that you find this time not only instructive, but also edifying, and we're going to jump in. We won't hit every single verse of the book, but we are going to start at the beginning and work our way through, hitting a few of the major highlights. And I've taken the liberty of dividing the book into sections based on how I see the text. So let's start with section 1a. So Habakkuk's complaint. And this one's short, so I'll read it. O Yahweh, how long shall I cry for help and you will not hear, or cry to you violence and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity? Why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. The law is paralyzed, justice never goes forth. The wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. All right, look at these questions, right? Why do you not hear? Why do you not save? Why do you stand idly by, Lord, and look at all this wrong that's going on without intervening? Habakkuk is most likely in Jerusalem. He's in the kingdom of Judah, the people that have God's covenant promises at this time. Right? The people that, of all the people on the earth, again, in this time and era, should be able to live in a way that is pleasing to God, loving Him and loving their neighbor, and they're not. We can probably relate to that. I'm sure there have been times in your life when you have felt like justice is far away, justice is perverted in some way. Maybe you turn on the news and you feel like you see more evidence of that day by day. It's definitely not a new problem. Habakkuk sees it. Habakkuk is bothered by it. Notice, what does Habakkuk do? He takes it to God. That's totally okay and good. The Bible never condemns somebody for coming to God and saying, God, where are you? Why aren't you doing something? Doesn't necessarily mean that Habakkuk's heart attitude is completely perfect. Obviously, we can't see into his heart, not being God. But it does mean that he's doing the right thing in coming and laying this out before God. All right? So, he gets an answer, so to speak. And this is interesting. In the text, there's no header between verse 4 and verse 5, so it goes directly there. And because of that, it seems like this is shifting to be God speaking. Notice verse 5, I'm doing a work in your days you would not believe if told. I'm raising up the Chaldean. So that's God, right? But there's no header here. Interesting thing, if we were to scroll down a little bit to the next time God speaks, notice we have the Lord answered me right there. Only time that occurs in the book. So because that doesn't occur up here, some scholars have suggested, and I think they're onto something, that this may not be that Yahweh is immediately answering Habakkuk right away. It may be that Habakkuk is looking back at things that God has already said, either to himself at a previous time, or maybe through other prophets that lived earlier or at the same time as him, and is just reflecting on this. It'd be kind of like if we had a problem, we asked God what's going on, and then we went to God's word and we looked to see, okay, why would God do something like this, or why would God allow something like this, and read something like this. And notice the verbs here. Look among the nations, see, wonder, be astounded, okay? For I'm doing a work in your days you would not believe if you were told. Okay, that sounds pretty good. If, we were told tomorrow, hey, look, wonder, be astounded. God is about to do something awesome. Oh, great. What is it? Well, behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans. Who are the Chaldeans? Those are the Babylonians, right? Tower of Babel, Babylon, destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, which is future to Habakkuk, but we know happened in 586 BC. this dreadful, fearsome people. They are swifter than leopards. They're fiercer than wolves, or that's just their horses. They fly like an eagle to devour. They gather captives like sand. You can read through the section, right? They sweep by like the wind, and they go on. Guilty men whose own might is their God. Okay. So, to recap, don't worry, Habakkuk. Look, be astounded. I'm about to do a great wonder. Well, what are you going to do? I'm going to bring the Babylonians in to punish the evil of my people. Oh, wait, what? Like, God, wait, that's not exactly what I had in mind here. I mean, we're bad, but them? And that's exactly what Habakkuk responds, right? Lord, like, you have purer eyes than to see evil. You cannot look at wrong. Like, why would you do this? Why would you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up someone more righteous than he? We might almost say that, like, Habakkuk's question is not answered in reflecting on God's word. It's actually gotten worse, right? God gave an answer. But the answer almost sounds worse than the problem. Like, okay, I could maybe get my mind around God's not doing something right now. But wait, God's going to respond to the evil of me and my people by bringing in a worse people to judge us? How can that be? Right? And Habakkuk just continues wrestling with this. Like, Lord, they're worse than we are. They're like a fisherman catching nations in a net, and what are they going to do? They're not going to catch the nations and then worship you and thank you for giving them the ability to do that. They're going to sacrifice to their net and make offerings to their drag net. Like, they're going to worship their own gods, their own implements of war. Lord, they have no idea that you're the one bringing them for judgment. They're just greedy, evil people that are desiring to conquer and pillage and live in luxury. How can this be okay? And so Habakkuk wraps up this section in chapter 2, verse 1 by saying, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower. I will look out to say what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. So notice there's a couple of things here. One, Habakkuk wants an answer. And this might make us feel a little uncomfortable, like, wait, can he demand an answer from God? Well, he's not necessarily demanding an answer, but he is being persistent. He's saying, I want to see what God has to say. And I want to see how I will answer, right? Notice there's two parts there. What will God say to me? And then how will I respond? So Habakkuk is not only expecting that God is going to answer him, but he's also expecting that he's then going to have a response to that answer. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And so that's the point when we get chapter 2, verse 2. Yahweh answered me. Okay, so this is definitely God speaking to Habakkuk at that moment. And he says, write the vision, make it plain on tablets so he may run who reads it. So the idea is write it down so that a messenger who would run with the news can read it. Make it plain. I'm going to answer you fully. The vision awaits its appointed time, okay? It hastens to the end. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. So there's kind of a tension here. It's coming, but it's not yet here, right? Theologians sometimes call this the already and the not yet. In a way, it's hastening, but in another way, it's far. The timing is known only to God. But if it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. So Habakkuk, even if you don't see my solution coming, wait. Okay? It will come. And then there are two responses to this. There's response A. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him. That's the response of arrogance. Okay, that's the response that says, God's solution isn't coming. God isn't doing anything. He's never going to do anything. I can do whatever I want. It's the response of the people around Noah. God's never going to send a flood. It's never rained. That big boat building is stupid. I'm just going to keep living my life. The second response is the response of the righteous. And this is one of the most important verses in all of the Old Testament. The righteous will live by his faith. What does that mean? And I want to unpack that for just a moment because I think this is very important. If you dig into the original languages, and we're not going to do a deep dive there now, but if you look at this phrase, his faith, there's a number of things that this could mean. This could mean the faith of a person. So the righteous person will live because he or she has faith. And there is some truth to that. It could also mean the faithfulness of God. And I think in this section, this one makes more sense with what Habakkuk is saying, or rather what God is saying to and through Habakkuk, right? Notice who's the focus here. The Lord. The Lord is going to make this thing happen. The Lord's vision awaits its appointed time. The Lord is going to keep his promises. And the righteous person will live not primarily because the righteous person has faith, but because God is not going to reject his people whom he's promised to sustain and to give life to. Even in the midst of the evil that Habakkuk sees in his society, God is not going to break his promise. And because God is not going to break his promise, there is hope. And we can trust, we can respond to God's faithfulness. Well, how would one respond to God's faithfulness? With trust, with our own faith. And so option number 1 actually piggybacks on top of option number 2. The righteous person in Habakkuk's day and in our own day lives because God is faithful, and because when we trust in God's faithfulness will never let us down. And so in a sense, we might say that we're saved, and the New Testament makes this point, we're saved through our faith, not because we're awesome and we have great faith and our faith is worth something, but because we're placing our faith in a God who is faithful and a God who never breaks his promises. Just like if we have the faith to sit in a chair, we're prevented from crashing to the ground not because we have great faith that the chair will hold us, but we don't crash to the ground because the chair is solid and the chair is faithful, if that makes sense. And so that's God's main response. And he goes on, and we won't read through all of the rest of chapter 2, but basically he says, Babylon's day will come too. They will not always get away with it. I will bring judgment to them. Just because I'm using them to punish evil, to bring discipline, doesn't mean that they just have a blank check to do whatever they want to do. And one day, you can see the word woe repeated all throughout this. One day, God will make them answer. And that section ends with, the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before him. At the end of the day, the buck stops with God. He is the one that all of us have to answer to, regardless of what people we're from. And that leads us to the last part of the book, to Habakkuk's prayer of response. So he's gotten his answer, trust. Habakkuk, I will keep my promises, I am faithful. Trust me. And at the very end of this prayer, which again, we don't have the time to read all the way through it, we get to verse 16. And Habakkuk says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. He's still afraid. And rightfully so, because there's still a punishment of the Babylonians coming, and Habakkuk, for all we know, may have lived through that. Yet, he says, I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. I will wait for the day when God makes all things right. I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation, even if everything else should fail. I think that's the biggest